There's a quiet feeling that follows you in certain moments. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand attention, but it stays there in the background. A subtle sense that you don't fully belong. Not in an obvious way, not in a way you can easily explain, but enough to make you notice. You look around and see people moving naturally through conversations, routines, relationships. Everything seems to flow for them in a way that feels slightly out of reach for you. Not impossible, just different, as if there's an invisible layer between you and everything else. And over time, you start asking yourself questions you don't always say out loud. Why do I feel this way? Why does everything seem more intense, more complicated, more distant? Why do I notice things others don't seem to care about? At first, you assume it's temporary, that eventually you'll adjust, that you'll fit in the same way everyone else seems to. So you observe. You adapt. You try to align yourself with what feels normal. And sometimes it works. You learn how to respond, how to behave, how to present yourself in a way that blends in. But even then, something doesn't fully settle, because fitting in and feeling connected are not the same thing. There's still a gap, quiet but persistent. And the more you ignore it, the more it turns into something else. Not just a feeling, but a question about who you are. A question that doesn't come from comparison, but from something deeper. Because deep down, part of you knows this isn't just about being different. It's about not understanding why. And that uncertainty is where everything begins. At some point, you start noticing that this feeling isn't random. It follows patterns. It appears in certain environments, around certain people, in specific situations where something inside you becomes more alert, more aware. You begin to see details others overlook. Subtle shifts in tone. Small inconsistencies in behavior, the way people say one thing but mean another. It's not something you learned consciously, but it's there, constantly processing in the background. And while that awareness can feel like clarity, it also creates distance. Because when you see too much, it becomes harder to stay immersed. Conversations feel predictable. Reactions feel repetitive. Situations start to unfold in ways you can almost anticipate before they happen. And that creates a strange experience. You're present but not fully inside it. It's like watching and participating at the same time. At first, this might feel like an advantage. You understand people more easily. You read between the lines. You avoid certain mistakes. But over time, something else begins to emerge. A quiet disconnection. Because while others are reacting naturally, you're analyzing. While they're immersed, you're observing. And that difference, subtle as it is, starts to separate you. Not physically, not socially, but internally. You begin to feel like you're always one step outside of the moment. And the more this happens, the more you question it. Is this awareness, or is it distance? Is it clarity? Or is it something else entirely? Because understanding everything doesn't always make you feel closer. Sometimes it does the opposite. Eventually, you start trying to fix it. Not because someone told you to, but because staying in that space feels unsustainable. You don't want to feel disconnected. You don't want to feel like an observer in your own life. So you begin adjusting. You speak more even when you don't feel like it. You simplify your thoughts so they match the pace of conversations around you. You try to react faster, to be more spontaneous, to let go of that constant analysis. And sometimes it works. You blend in. You become easier to understand. Interactions feel smoother, more natural. For a moment, it seems like you've finally aligned with everything around you. But then, something subtle happens. You feel tired. Not physically, but mentally. Like you're maintaining something that doesn't come naturally. Like you're translating yourself in real time, adjusting your thoughts to fit a rhythm that isn't fully yours. And that effort, even when it's invisible to others, builds up. Because you're not just participating anymore. You're performing. And the more you do it, the harder it becomes to tell where the performance ends and you begin. What started as an attempt to connect slowly turns into something else, a quiet form of self-distance. You're present, you're interacting, you're involved, but something inside you knows it's not entirely real, and that realization creates a different kind of discomfort. Not the discomfort of being different, but the discomfort of not being fully yourself, Because trying to become what feels normal can sometimes take you further away from what feels true. And that's when the question changes. It's no longer, why am I different? It becomes, what am I ignoring about myself? That question doesn't come with an immediate answer. It lingers. It stays in the background of your thoughts, quietly reshaping the way you see yourself and everything around you. Instead of trying to eliminate the feeling of being different, you begin to examine it. Not as a problem to fix, but as something to understand. And slowly the perspective starts to shift. What once felt like distance begins to reveal itself as sensitivity. What felt like overthinking starts to look more like depth. The awareness that once disconnected you from others begins to show you patterns that were always there, just unnoticed. You start realizing that the issue was never the way you perceive things. It was the way you judged that perception. Somewhere along the way, you learned that thinking too much was a flaw, that feeling deeply was a weakness, that noticing more than others was something to suppress, not explore. So you tried to adjust, to reduce yourself, to match a rhythm that felt easier, more acceptable, more common. But now that effort starts to lose its meaning, because the more you observe without trying to change it, the more you see that your difference isn't random. It follows a pattern, a consistent way of interpreting, processing, and responding to the world. And for the first time, instead of asking how to get rid of it, you begin to ask what it's showing you, not about others, but about yourself. And that's where things begin to settle. Not because everything suddenly makes sense, but because the question itself changes direction. You're no longer trying to become like everyone else. You're no longer measuring yourself against a standard that never fully matched you in the first place. Instead, you begin to recognize something quieter, but more stable. Your experience of the world isn't wrong. It's simply different. And that difference doesn't need to be forced into something else to be valid. It doesn't need constant adjustment, constant filtering, constant translation, just to feel acceptable. For a long time, the discomfort came from comparison, from the idea that there was a correct way to think, to feel, to exist, and that you were slightly out of alignment with it. But now, that idea starts to lose its weight, because you begin to see that what you called different was never a mistake. It was a perspective, a way of noticing things that aren't immediately visible, a way of processing experiences that go beyond the surface, a way of being present that doesn't always follow the same rhythm, but still holds meaning. And once you stop resisting that, something changes, not externally, not in a way others can easily point out, but internally. The distance becomes clarity, the confusion becomes understanding, and the question that once felt heavy no longer needs an answer in the same way, because you're not trying to fix yourself anymore. You're finally allowing yourself to exist without constantly adjusting to fit a version of normal that was never truly yours.